Today, I want to tell you a little story. And you've probably heard the story before, but I'm going to tell you anyway because it's always an intriguing story to me. And I was reading through it this morning. There's so much drama here. I won't get into the drama too much. You may know part of the story about Jacob and Esau. And if you don't, I'll kind of give you the Reader's Digest version. Jacob was a guy who was kind of a con man of sorts. You know, he was that, I don't want to call him a con man, but he was kind of the guy who would figure out, work the angles to get what he wanted. And I think in a lot of ways, he learned that from his mom because his mother, Rebecca, helped him work the angles too. Obviously, his brother Esau was to receive the inheritance. You know, back then, the older brother received the inheritance. Sometimes it was based on other things, but Esau was squared away to receive his father's inheritance, his blessing, as well as his birthright. And along the way, Esau loved to hunt. Jacob was not the big burly guy, you know. Esau was the big burly hairy guy who loved to go out and hunt and do things. And so he was kind of daddy's favorite. And he was the one that's set up to really receive everything, inheritance, blessing, and all that from his father. And Jacob would end up serving his brother for the rest of his life. Well, Rebecca didn't really want that. Jacob didn't really want that. And Jacob was always working out a way to try to hoodwink Esau. And he did end up robbing Esau of his birthright at one point. Of course, Esau was quite foolish, but nevertheless, he ended up robbing him for his birthright. And then later on, when his father was ill and old, it was time for his father to bless Esau and give him his blessing, which is a big deal. And Rebecca, after his dad sent him out, said, "Go hunt me some game and bring it back, and I'll give you my blessing." Rebecca actually got Jacob to dress up with some hairy animal skins and whatever to try to fool his father, whose vision had failed pretty much, and bring him some meat to receive the blessing. So he does all this kind of conniving stuff, and he actually gets the blessing, and then afterwards, come Esau. Esau comes back with the food, ready for his father's blessing, and his father says, "Wait a minute, who are you?" He says, "I'm your son, Esau. I just hunted this for you." He says, "Well, who was that?" And so not only did Esau get his birthright stolen from him, he got the blessing stolen from him. Well, obviously, he was angry. He had said, "Well, once we get done mourning my father who died, I'm going to kill Jacob." And the word got out that was going to happen. So, the father had not died yet. So, Rebecca worked it out. So Jacob got sent away to her brother Laban. And so Jacob flees, because if he doesn't, Esau's going to do him in. And he goes to Laban. And again, I'm trying to keep the story, give you a little bit of background here. So he goes to Laban, and he tries to pull the same kind of, different sort of little schemes and shenanigans with Laban. And Laban's just as much of a con man as he is, pretty much, and he out-cons him. So Jacob thinks he's going to con Laban into getting the daughter that he wants of the two daughters and work 7 years. But when he gets to the end of the 7 years, Laban says, "Oh, no, that's for the older sister. You have to work another 7 years for the other one." And so he ends up working 14 years, and he ends up, there's just all this kind of con man thing going back and forth between them for, a couple decades. And finally, Jacob takes all of his stuff, and he bolts, and he runs away from Laban. And Laban tracks him down and catches up with him. And they work it out in large part because one of Laban's daughters tells a lie. She had stolen the household gods, the little idols from Laban, and she's sitting on them, and she didn't tell her dad that I had them. She lied and said she couldn't get up because it was her time of the month, and so on. So anyway, they worked that out, and then here's Jacob now. Laban is gone. Jacob's heading back, but he's heading back in the territory of Esau. Esau had threatened that he was going to kill his brother all these years before. So now Jacob's like, "Wait a minute, I'm terrified." And this is where we pick up the story. And there's a point here because Jesus tells us something very key in the book of John. So I'm going to read just a little bit of the story, and you'll get an idea of what I'm talking about. It's a great example, I think, of what we learn in the book of John. So this is starting in Genesis 32, verse 9. It says, then Jacob prayed because he's afraid. He says, "O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, go back to your country and your relatives, and I will make you prosperous. I am unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you have shown your servant. I had only my staff when I crossed this Jordan, but now I have become two groups of people." Because he was so afraid of his brother, he'd split him into two groups, figuring if his brother destroyed one. His brother's coming with 400 men, he's told. And he's thinking, oh, he's just done for. So he splits everybody into two groups, figuring if his brother Esau attacks one, the other one will survive. Again, he's still trying to work it out. He's trying to work the angles. It's just his nature. He's not trusting in God. He's trying to figure it out. I'm going to pray, but I know I'm going to have to sort this out. And so he's, again, relying upon his own wits. This is very convicting for me because I do this kind of stuff all the time. In any case, he says, I had only my staff, as I said, when I crossed this Jordan, but now I have become two groups, because he'd split them up. Save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau, for I am afraid he will come and attack me, and also the mothers with their children. But you have said, I will surely make you prosper, and will make your descendants like the sands of the sea, which cannot be counted. Well, he spent the night there, and from what he had with him, he selected a gift for his brother Esau. He's still trying to work it out. He's still trying to get a plan going on there. He says 200 female goats, 20 male rams, all these animals he decides to send out. So he put them in the care of his servants, each herd by itself, and he sent his servants and said, go ahead and of me and keep some space between the herds. He instructed the one in the lead, when my brother Esau meets you and asks, to whom do you belong and where are you going, and who owns these animals in front of you, then you are to say, they belong to my servant Jacob. They are a gift to my lord Esau, and he is coming behind us. And then he instructed the next group, the second group. Okay, when you get there, do the same thing. And the third group, okay, when you get there, do the same thing. And he's thinking to himself, okay, I'm sending you ahead. I'm going to placate my brother here. I'm going to make him feel better about me. So by the time he gets to me, he will have received so many gifts. Maybe I'll be okay. This is all his. He's all doing all this conniving stuff, right? Meanwhile, God has already worked this out, and he has no idea. And because he wasn't trusting in God, he didn't know God had already worked it out. So that night, he's by himself, and the scriptures tell us in verse 22 through 30, I think, that he ends up wrestling with this guy in the night. Yeah, it's okay. So my wife's making breakfast. She's worried about making noise. He ends up wrestling with this guy in the night. He doesn't realize who it is. He's wrestling with the angel of the Lord. He's wrestling with God. And he goes to this wrestling match, and so I just picture myself sometimes at night, I'm wrestling in the spirit with things. He's up at night, he's anxious, he's worried that he's going to die tomorrow, that his brother's going to come kill him and wipe them all out. He's done all these planning, and he's still not satisfied. He still feels like, I haven't done enough, and he's still not trusting in God. And so here he wrestles all night with this guy. But he can't beat him. And this guy kind of doesn't beat him. It's sort of a draw. And finally, the guy he's wrestling with says, let me go. We're done. He says, I'm not letting you go until you bless me. And so the angel of the Lord, God, reaches out and knocks Jacob's hip out of joint. Let me give you a little reminder of who you wrestled with, basically, is the lesson there. I'm going to knock this out of joint, and every time you take a step and it hurts, you're going to remember who you wrestled with. And then he tells him, okay, your name is no longer Jacob, because you wrestled with God and you wrestled with man, and you've overcome. So your name is Israel. So the next morning comes, okay? And in chapter 33, verse 1, Jacob looks up, and there was Esau coming with his 400 men. So he divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and the two maidservants. He put the maidservants and their children in front, Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph in the rear. He himself went on ahead and bowed down to the ground 7 times as he approached his brother. He's still trying to get all the details right. He's still trying to save himself. He's not really relying upon God, even though he prayed. But Esau ran to meet Jacob. He ran to meet him and embraced him. So you can just see Esau gets off of his camel or whatever. He runs to his brother. He grabs him up. Esau's a big, burly guy, and Jacob was kind of small. I reach out, grab him up, and hug him. So excited to see him. This is not what Jacob expected to be done. So Esau ran up to get him, embraced him. He threw his arms around him and his neck and kissed him, and he wept. Then Esau looked up and saw the women and children. "Who are these with you?" he asked. Jacob answered, "They are the children God has graciously given your servant." And the maidservants and their children approached and bowed down. Next, Leah and her children came and bowed down. Last of all, Joseph and Rachel, and they too bowed down. And Esau asked, "What do you mean by all these droves that I met along the way?" "Well, to find favor in your eyes, my lord," Jacob says. I lost my place here. Sorry about that. Here you go. Okay. But Esau says, "I already have plenty, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself." "No, please," said Jacob. "If I have found favor in your eyes, accept this gift from me, for I see your face is like seeing the face of God. Now that you have received me favorably, please accept the present that was brought to you, for God has been gracious to me, and I have all I need." And because Jacob insisted, Esau accepted the gift. What I see here is that while Jacob was off on his life, conniving and trying to rip off Laban, and Laban is ripping him off, and he's doing all this stuff, and then he's commanded by God, "I want you to go home." Esau's cooled off by then, and God has blessed Esau. Esau did some rebellious stuff too, but God has still blessed Esau, and Esau has prospered. And so now you have Jacob. He's afraid because he doesn't trust God. He's afraid that when he meets his brother's still mad, and his brothers want to kill him. And yet when his brother gets the news, your brother Jacob is returning, his brother is over the moon about it. He gets all his men, and off he goes with this great procession for the purpose of greeting his brother. I mean, it's as if I want to throw a feast. My brother is back. He was dead and he's alive again. So I thought about this morning, and I thought about a few scriptures. I think Proverbs 18:16 that talks about the gift ushers the way to the giver. But then I really thought about something that Jesus said in the book of John when Peter wanted to know, why can't I go with you? Why can't I follow you now? I'll lay down my life for you, he says. He doesn't want to follow Jesus' plan. He wants to do what he wants to do, and he wants to do it right now. He doesn't want to do it later. He doesn't want to have to wait. And Jesus says, "Are you really going to lay down your life for me? I can tell you right now, before the rooster crows, you will have denied me 3 times. And then he says, "Do not let your heart be troubled. Trust in God. Trust also in me." Now he goes on to talk about his father's house. There's many rooms. If it were not so, I would tell you, and because there are many rooms, I'll come back and get you, and I'll take you so that you can be with me. But that first statement is where I fall down a lot. Trust, do not let your heart be troubled. Trust in God. Trust also in me. So I look at the story of Jacob and Esau, and I see that God had a plan. He had this worked out. It was always worked out. It was always going to work out for Jacob. It was always going to work out for Esau. But Jacob was he was the finagler. He was the guy that, man, I'm going to try to get what I want. I'm going to finagle. I'm going to trick, and I'm going to play the trick and conniving game. And I know I can work the angles, and I can get this, and I can get that, and I can achieve this. And so he did it to his brother, and then God pretty much sent him to Laban, who treated him the same way, and it didn't all work out for him. Yeah, he got a little more than from Laban, and Laban got a little bit more from him, and they kind of rooked each other a few times. But Jacob got the same treatment he was given to other people, and he kind of met his match at Laban, and they each one got the upper hand a little bit. And then he goes off in the desert, and he's afraid, and he prays and asks God for help, and God comes. And he wrestles with God. Why? Because he doesn't want to trust God. He doesn't want to go where God wants to do. He wants to do it himself. And I think when I read him wrestling with God, that's what I see. I see Jacob wrestling with God rather than trusting in him. And he got his hip knocked out of joint as a reminder. That's pretty key, I think. And for the rest of his life, he walked around with his hip out of joint, to the degree that the Jews even got to the point where they did not consume that tendon, the tendon from the joint there of the animals that they ate, because that was where the injury was in Jacob. And so they honored that by not consuming that piece of meat in their tradition. And then he meets Jacob meets Esau, and he's all terrified, and he sends him all his stuff because he figures, like Proverbs says, the gift ushers the way for the giver and brings him into the presence of the great and the powerful. I'm going to send this to my brother. Maybe he'll forgive me if I give him a bunch of stuff. And it was all unnecessary. It was all unnecessary. Esau was already very well off because God had blessed him. All he wanted back was his brother. So when I look at this, I think of all the different things in my life. I am the guy. I am that dude who will try to work every angle. I am that guy who will try to immediately sit down and figure out, okay, I got a problem. Let me figure out how I can fix it. I got an issue. Something happened with a real rental property. Something's going on with the business. Something's going on with the drama in the family. Something's going on with this, that, the other thing. Okay, well, write down. I'll get down right now and go, okay, well, we got to do this, and we got to do that, and we got to do the other thing, and I got to send these people off far off, and then I'll send some other people after them, and I'm working my plan. And I ignore the fact that God's plans are better. God knows what's going on. God's plans have been in place since long before I was ever born, or even thought of other than by him. His plans always work. His timing is always perfect. His will is always perfect. And no matter what I try to do, his will always be done. And so it's for me to align myself with his will, not expect him to do the reverse. There's an old saying that God made man in his image, and man has been trying to return the favor ever since. That's not for me to do. It's for me to trust in God and trust also in the Messiah. And that's why Jesus said, do not let your heart be troubled. Trust in God. Trust also in me. Well, if you're like me, and you're Mr. Planet Fix It, make it work, work it out, get the plan going, I'm going to do it on my own. If that's you, well, I totally get it. I completely identify with you, just like I identify with Jacob. And I wanted to share this with you because this lesson this morning in my quiet time was super convicting for me. I thought it might be for you as well. So I urge you, as you go through your week, trust in God. Trust also in Jesus. He is the Messiah, after all. He is Lord. He is King. And as we learn from the Word, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to him. That leaves nothing out. And that means the authority in your life, too. Have a great week.